Coming up on the Maine Challenge, activists who were arrested earlier this year at the Maine Capitol. Join us on Maine Challenge to see what they have to say. Hi, and welcome to this week's Maine Challenge. We are in the vortex of a lot of historical events at the moment. We are just days away from the presidential inauguration. We are just days after an insurrection at the US Capitol, the likes of which we have never seen. We are looking at the 53rd anniversary of Martin Luther King's assassination, and we are on the verge of a new presidency and the exiting of an old one. So it is a very important time, and I am thrilled to have with us this week two very special guests who have been involved in demonstrations, not the one last week, but in ones before that, about bringing up justice and equality and keeping democracy on track and keeping us putting forward the things that need to happen. So I am very, very excited to introduce you today to Latchmi Gopal, who is with us from the Bronx, New York, and she is awesome. She was a national organizer for Bernie in 2020. She is a national organizer with By the People, which is an organization working on impeachment. And she is now, very excitingly, running for city council in New York City in the Bronx and in a special election on March 23rd. So Latchmi, we're so excited to have you. Thank you for taking time out to be with us today. And we also have with us Marcy Makinen, who is one of the organizers, one of the tri-organizers of the Poor People's Campaign here in Maine. She is on the board of her UU church. She has been involved in activism for a long time. She is a fierce advocate and a proud mama. And we are very thrilled to have you here too, Marcy, and to have you both with us. So thank you so much for being here at this really, what I think is a real pivot point in our democracy, a real time and pivot point for justice. So first thing I'd like to ask, and Marcy, I'll come to you first, is tell us a little bit about how you got to working on the Poor People's Campaign and how you got to being an activist. And there's lots of people who don't choose that path. So what's that been like for you and what got you here?
Yeah, thanks. I came into the campaign in 2018. I was extremely impacted by the election of our current president in 2016. And after spending about 24 months feeling pretty immobilized and useless, I realized that I needed to get involved in something. And like a lot of people, there were a gazillion things that came up, but it was really hard to pick which one to get involved in. And right. And the Poor People's Campaign for me was the one, because of the way it brings together so many different people from all walks of life. And we organize to change the narrative around a few really important issues that mattered a lot to me, like the environment and systemic racism and poverty and the war economy. So, yeah.
Great. Well, thanks for all that you're doing. And we'll come right back to that. And Latchmi, I'm so excited to have you here as well. And I know that you have been on a path. And so tell me a little bit about how you became an activist or decided that activism was the thing that was going to feed you and make a difference in the world.
Yeah, thank you so much first for having me on. Big fan of Maine in general, and so excited to be here. And yeah, I actually have a similar story around the election and feeling extremely immobilized by it. Before then, I had been doing advocacy work, economic justice work, and was on my way to actually go to law school. I was very interested in doing that. And the election happened, and in New York, especially with the physical structures that are connected to our current president that are just all throughout New York City, it became an epicenter of mobilization. It became an epicenter of dissent around what was happening through Trump's presidency and the support of the GOP. And I was led by and encouraged by other women of color here in New York who'd been have been strategizing and doing the work around how do you use nonviolent action and street mobilization as part of the strategy of how we actually hold government accountable. And so through the election is actually where I started to do that work. and started to develop my activist leg that was in addition to all the other advocacy work I was doing. And so I learned so much about strategy and how you mobilize through the immobilization and the frustrations that a lot of my own community members had, but the entire country had around what was happening in 2016.
Yeah. Wow. Okay, good. Well, so I know you both watched in horror, as did I, and probably most of our viewers, as we saw the insurrection at the Capitol. And there was so many layers of horrificness in that time, or now even. Part of what was happening, part is what was going on, part was the treatment. But I know that both of you have been involved in mass protests and peaceful protests. And I know that both of you have been arrested. And I know that you have been through not similar in outcome, but in efforts to have our voice heard, which is our American right. And it's something that's so important to our democracy. But I also know that your experience was very different than what the protesters experienced on last Wednesday. So I wondered if you would share with us a little bit about your experience and any contrasts that you were able to see. So Marcy, you want to start?
Oh, sure. So hugely different. I've been arrested twice with the Poor People's Campaign and Reverend Barber in DC. We were very organized. We were very disciplined. We have an agenda that we wanted to give to our policymakers, and so we are en route on our march. We are praying and singing and peacefully marching, and we were stopped by lots of Capitol police before we got anywhere near the Capitol, and we were outnumbered. There were at least 300 of us. So we had a particular point and a message to bring, and and whereas this what we saw the other day was something entirely different. Like that was not protesting. That was more of an attempt to overthrow democracy.
Yeah. And so and tell me the circumstances of when you were arrested. What were you arrested for disorderly conduct? Were you arrested for being in a space that you weren't supposed to be in?
I am trying to recall what it was. Sometimes it's trespassing. Sometimes it's like refusing to disperse. Sometimes it's just like, not responding the way you're supposed to respond when you've been asked to respond a certain way. It was nothing that serious.
Right.
But the message are in the numbers, and the power are in the numbers, and that we're showing up in unison with a unified message in step.
And peacefully. So Latchmi, I know that you also, when you were talking about impeachment back in 2019, that you also were arrested. So what were your perspectives on how different this was and how people were treated?
Yeah, thank you. It was extremely different. I think there's strategy, and peaceful protesting has been part of liberation and civil rights movement forever. It's been a tactic of holding our government to the utmost highest standard. It's an accountability tactic. And so what happened at the Capitol last week was not at all a peaceful protest. It was exactly what was just described around an overthrow of democracy. And I think one of the biggest differences too is the response, or the lack thereof, police response. And so in my particular, the arrest at the Capitol that I experienced by the people, a group of organizers and various volunteers who came together with the sole purpose of recognizing the importance of impeaching and removing Donald Trump years ago. And so the arrest that we're discussing right now happened in May 2019, and it happened in the lobby of the Capitol, the same Capitol, which is honestly the people's house, the same Capitol in which the individuals attacked and trespassed into last week, we entered legally. We entered through security lines, went through metal detectors, had some banners and some literature around why it was important to impeach. The entire demonstration involved song and chanting to ground folks in it. There were some speeches. We were arrested in less than 14 minutes, all of us. Less than 14 minutes. And we were given warnings, and there's protocol around protesting and civil disobedience and what happens with police response. But even that, where we were taking up space in the Capitol lobby and we were expressing accountability and wants from the American people, but to see no actual response from the police, from the National Guard, and no utilization of what is supposed to be a justice system to keep people safe, especially at the Capitol, and our representatives, every staff members who are working there, just to keep Americans safe, did not happen. But yet they were deployed on us in a peaceful protest. And I think it's a stark difference. And it just shows who gets policed in this country. I think it's a larger conversation around who gets policed, what silencing actually occurs and doesn't occur through state-sanctioned police response. And so it was a stark difference, and it was extremely triggering to watch, because as the news was coming in and I was seeing the Capitol, and I've been there, I've stood on those steps. I've expressed with my comrades in liberation. I've expressed with my comrades in liberation what needs to be done. And to see the lack of response, and for days now, nothing has really occurred, right? And so it's not just the moment, but afterwards, like we were arrested and there was accountability there, but it didn't happen to folks yet. And we don't know if it will.
Right, and we don't know. And I think you talked about something, and this is where I want to go. So we cannot ignore the impact that race had on this. You know, the vast majority of people that stormed the Capitol and took over were white. And in all these other protests, it's a very mixed crowd. Certainly in the Black Lives Matter marches, where we saw this summer, you know, where there was a lot of people of color marching, and, you know, the response was so different. And then, you know, I just think about Trump's language, right? You know, during the summer, we were called thugs and looters and losers and, you know, just horrible mobsters, right? And then his message finally, when it was, you know, much too little too late, was, we love you, you're good people, but you have to go home. Like, I mean, that, you know, the starkness is unbelievable. But to me, it seems like this just was another illumination, an additional illumination of the deep racism in our police structures and in our governmental structures. Can you talk about that a little bit? Either one of you.
I would say that this isn't new, that the police are overly present at peaceful demonstrations organized by people of color or poor and low-income people. And that I think policing actually came out of slavery, the need to corral slaves to make sure that they were doing the free labor that they were there to do. And I think that we've seen this division since post-construction, since the late 1870s, and then again in the 1960s, where electoral strategies is in place intended to keep poor and low impacted white folks from uniting with people of color. And there's, as long as that wedge can stay fueled, that the wedge that's created is what's allowed the division to stay in place. But it's clearly changing. Because this violence that we just experienced is a reaction to a record turnout of people who voted for candidates that pledged to expand healthcare and raise wages and address systemic racism and poverty, not only in the general election, but also in the Georgia runoff. So I think that as we begin to see unity among all of us and building of a fusion movement, their resistance to keep the status quo needs to accelerate.
Yeah. Latchmi, your thoughts?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for that. I think the historical analysis of that is so important. And a lot of people, when they're thinking through what's happening in current day, don't recognize how it's been built. The system has been built to function the way it does. And one thing I will add there is, I think people right now, what occurred at the Capitol is a direct result of an America that serves a certain small percentage of individuals, and that the system is particularly built to continue to uplift and to provide resources to and opportunity to in a very clear way, is starting to deteriorate through electoralizing and through actual collaboration that is happening, for instance, at the Poor People's Campaign and beyond, throughout the movements and grassroots organizing. Folks are being given information, given analysis to really come to spaces and come to their realizations as to what's happening in our country, from a place of both like care and accuracy. And you're seeing the current America, shift. You're seeing that, and what's happening is people who significantly benefit from it, like the individuals who were part of the insurgents of the Capitol last week, not know how to handle it. And I find it extremely triggering and also have no sympathy. Black and brown people, marginalized folks, immigrants, working class individuals, day in and day out, deal with a system that is meant to oppress them, deal with a system that is built to harm us. And so, and we're not raiding the Capitol. Right. And so I think it also, we have to analyze privilege when we're having these conversations too, and what expectations as to who has access and whose America this is. We're redefining, we're reimagining things, and it has to be from a place of care and from a place of inclusivity. And that is not boding well with a certain percentage of individuals in this country right now.
Right, who have been able to control the systems and all of the structures that we have. And I sometimes feel like this sort of white male power structure is holding on by its fingernails, because they see, and as the work of the Poor People's Campaign and all the work that you are doing and we are all doing together to try and build an inclusive movement that actually puts people first, and is amazing. One thing I want to go back to before, because I want to go right into that, but one of the things that struck me that was so triggering, I guess, or so, what was the attitude of the mobsters, whatever, the insurgents, right? They were not afraid of the police. They felt entitled. They were taking selfies. It was just such a thing. Like in every demonstration that I've been in since the 60s, we are totally respectful. Everyone's like, make sure and I talked to, people of color, friends of mine who are saying, you can't even move sideways. You don't blink your eyes in a wrong way or something bad's going to happen to you. And this was a mob of people who just felt completely none of that fear, none of that respect, none of that worry. And so it just like got me like right here. And I was like, oh my God, this is a bunch of entitled white men, right? Just as you were saying. Yeah, go ahead, Marcy.
I would say that that's all cause for alarm. I would say that the deference that they were given by law enforcement and security forces is an indication that there were folks close by that were aware of what was going on and helping it. This riot exposes the MAGA movement as a fake populism that serves elites. It's a mistake to scapegoat poor people, especially poor white people, for what happened on January 6th. The press reports of the rioters included business owners, executives, and multimillionaires.
Yeah, I think that's a narrative that the press has held on to. And even Trump said, I don't like how low class, which is ridiculous, of course, from what he said. But I just think that sense of entitlement, that sense of it was so stark to me about, and as you said, Latchmi, this is when people say this is not our America. It's like, oh yeah, well, this has been America for people of color and, folks, marginalized people forever. This is how our system was designed. And so, yeah, this is our America. And until we start dealing with the fact that this is our America and that this is what's fomenting and this is what's, this is the sort of hanging on pivot point that we're at, I don't think we're not going to move forward until we say, no, instead of saying, oh, no, this was an anomaly, instead of saying, no, this was absolutely grew out of the deep roots of racism and oppression that this system has been serving up for hundreds of years. Yeah. So let's talk about, is this, in what ways, or are there ways in which this moment, and this certainly was seen around the country and around the world, and I think a lot of people who had sort of been like, well, it's not that bad, whatever, sort of if the summer didn't wake them up, which it should have, that they were like, oh wow, wait a minute. Okay, maybe we are in trouble here, or maybe there is a deeper racial issue, or maybe there is a deeper systemic issue. Are we at a pivot point? Can we utilize this moment to pivot in a way that moves us in leaps forward instead of the sort of inching along that I feel like we've been having to do? Are you hopeful that this is a pivot point at all?
I am hopeful. I do think that it's frightening times that we're in, and I don't think it's just the usual those of us that are frightened now. And I certainly hope that there's certainly plenty of good organizing happening, especially the Poor People's Campaign is a moral fusion movement, and we have a comprehensive analysis around race and poverty, and a narrative that seeks to shine a light on policy violence, rather than to get out of the Democrat versus Republican. It's more like right versus wrong, what's morally right. And so we certainly offer an opportunity for people to come in and find a way to be part of something in step with lots of folks all over the country.
Yeah. Latchmi, do you think there is an opportunity here to connect the dots for people who have been on the outside or wanting big change or systemic change? Is this a time for us now that we can make some of those changes?
Oh, 100%. I don't think that, as an activist and a community organizer, the conversations that I'm having both on a national scale and locally here in the Bronx, people have to be hopeful in order to get through the next 24 hours. And I think as more individuals are getting the information that they need to really start to make decisions about wanting to participate in things like the Georgia Send-Off races or the elections that just occurred, or just joining community boards, right? That is happening across the country. And so, yeah, I think definitely there's it. And I would argue that there's always a chance to pivot as long as we are in transparent relationship with what is occurring. So I think a lot of what happens in America is we are not given transparent information, and therefore having to unlearn so much of what we're taught, both in our school systems and in our communities, about what actual history is. And then we're quote unquote radicalized to participate. And also looking at this Georgia Senate races and the past election of the last 4 years, everything from the congressional races in 2018 to what's been occurring since then, so many individuals are texting, are phone banking, are writing postcards, are figuring out ways to mobilize and activate their blocks, their neighborhoods, and their state. There's a place in movement for everyone. It has to be, and it's only going to function if it's multi-generational, multiracial, and multi-interest based, right? And so you're seeing it happen. I have, just on my campaign alone for city council in the Bronx, I have volunteers who are in their 90s and who are 12. Right. And so, as long as a 12-year-old is accompanied by a parent, we can make things happen. Right. And if people are very interested in thinking through how they can show up, not just for politics, I think it's more this orientation of community and recognizing that politics is an aspect of it. And I think so often we've been gatekept away from the political system because we're not supposed to be involved. And like when we vote in masses, especially Black, brown, poor, working class individuals, we see the difference we can make, and that's powerful. And so I'm so hopeful. People are mobilized, people are recognizing their own power, and that is, you can't, you got to reckon with that, because the power is legitimately with the people here. And we got to remind the country and the systems that that's the case.
Well, one of the things that was really striking to me was some of the language, both of Trump and some of the protesters. If you took the people out, right, and you just took the words about the people's house, and that we want, people to be represented, and that this government has betrayed us, and that feels like the same message that we have. I feel the same way. I feel like this government has betrayed us, and I feel like we have, this is the people's house, and it's exactly what you just said, Latchmi, that the divide is really up and down, not right and left. And we are seeing that this divide is really up and down. And it was just so striking to me, if I had put Marcy's face up or your face up with, you know, those same words, we would all be like, yes, that's right. But somehow it translated it translates for them. I think we haven't done the community building and the capturing, because it's translated for them to be like, turn around and say, okay, who can I be mad at? All right, let me be mad at, you know, this person I don't know anything about, or let me be mad at these people of color, or these poor people, instead of saying, let's be mad at the institutions that actually are not responding to us in a democracy. You know, it seems it's a little striking how much of the words are the same, but and some of the rage actually, but it's really the difference is how it's channeled. And I think, you know, what are your thoughts about that?
I think we have more in common with most of the people that were probably at the State House, at the Capitol rather, on the 6th. I think that the lines of division that have been sown historically make us think that our issues are not in common, but they actually are. There's only a few people whose agenda is really being met by a lot of the resistance to the social inequities that we're trying to address in our organizing. And I think you're absolutely right that communication across those lines of folks that we haven't connected with and reached yet to speak about issues that are meaningful to them, you know.
Yeah. Latchmi, thoughts?
Yeah, I think communication is key in a lot of this, like you just described. And I think language, unfortunately, has been used violently from our government. It's been used violently and in the vein of propaganda and manipulation to continue to create that divide. If you have folks who are all oppressed by the same system fighting each other, they're not going to be in a position to actually organize to fight a system or to reimagine what a system that is meant to actually serve and to be an asset and provide the chance and opportunity for a dignified living. They're not going to be able to hold that system accountable if we're so distracted with who did wrong and who should be blamed for the immediate pain or lack of opportunity or violence that we're experiencing, if we're not looking at it from a systemic point of view. And they do that on purpose. And language is very much the way in which the first bits of that and the long-lasting effects of that happen. And so really chipping away at what that is. And I think campaigns like the Poor People's Campaign, grassroots movements, all of these things have really been working to really shift us in a way of being empowered by language and reclaiming what that is so that we can start to be activated and analyzed properly to understand the quote unquote enemy when it's not any of us. It is a system itself that we have to reimagine and we have to rebuild together. And I'm hopeful. I am hopeful that we are moving in that direction. And the younger generation, especially Gen Z, I actually don't think that they are limited at all. The access to information and the boldness to do what they want and to really push, that is something that we 100% need in combination with learned lessons from older folks who've been doing the work. I think it has to be both. And so it's very possible.
Yeah. Well, so unfortunately, it's unbelievable. We could keep talking for hours. We are getting very close to the end here. And so, but I love what you said. We have to work together. We have to speak common language. We have to organize the system, because the system is the thing that we are organizing against, not each other, not looking for blame. So we all have a lot of work to do. And one of the things I look forward to in this year is all of us doing our own personal work as we look at racism, and we look at the things that our classism and the things that we bring to the table when we come together, to make sure that we can go forward in some hope and that there really are better days ahead. So I would love to have you guys come back on and talk about sort of what we expect next. But I just want to say thank you so much to both of you. And I also want to say, if you're watching, go to Latchmi Gopal's, look her up on Google, find her website. She is running for the city council in Bronx. Imagine having this voice in one of the largest cities, or the largest city in America. It is amazing. And so please do what you can to help her out in terms of volunteering, donating, all of those things that Latchmi could use. And I know, Marcy, that Poor People's Campaign has lots coming up. So make sure you go to the Poor People's website here in Maine, their Facebook page here in Maine, and together we can make this a pivot point in which we actually make some real systemic change that is going to serve every person in Maine and across this country. So Thank you for your work. Thank you for your time today. And to all of you watching, thanks for being with us.
Show your support for Maine Challenge and LCTV's programming. We're all about community. Please go to lctv.org to make a contribution. Your support makes us stronger together.